Start the video. Good morning and welcome to all of you to a crash course on design thinking. This will be a pretty fast-paced session because we want to cover a lot of ground. And again, apologies for the delay in starting. We'll make, you can see the instructions there. If you go to links.asu.edu/sprint, and if you're logged in with your personal Google Gmail or Google account, you will be given a copy of the workbook. If for some reason that doesn't work, just follow along with us, have like a place where you can take your notes, and we should be good to go. As I said, this is going to be a sprint. We will zoom through a whole sequence through the entire design thinking process, working collaboratively. And I'll let Danah sort of start us off, and then we just go back and forth and through this. So excited to do this. Danah?
Yes. Yes. Well, hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Danah Henriksen. I'm an associate professor in the Teachers College at ASU. And my co-presenter, Punya Mishra, is the Associate Dean of Scholarship and Innovation at ASU. We both study creativity and design thinking in education, and as well as doing some work in STEAM. So we're excited to be here with you today and take this design sprint through the workshop, where you'll get just a very quick snapshot of design thinking processes. So our time is tight. We're going to get started, but with first a kind of a quick recap of the keynote session about design thinking in STEAM that we did on Wednesday, so that everybody is coming from a bit of background on foundations for the workshop there. We want to start by highlighting the fact that education is already all about design. So design is everywhere in education because every aspect of education is designed. Design is essentially the artificial world around us of human created objects, processes, ideas, and artifacts. And because education is a completely human-centered and human-engineered field, from the structure of the school day to the creation of curricula, lessons, processes, school buildings, and learning artifacts, because of that, all education is designed. And most importantly, teachers are designers. They're designers of learning experiences. They're designers of classroom practices, lessons, and so much of how students experience learning in the classroom relates to how teachers create and design their own pedagogy in classrooms. So you may be thinking, great, but what does this have to do with STEAM? Why and how do they pair together? We're going to real quick recap the definition of what design thinking is all about and see how it relates to STEAM. So it is a design thinking is a purposeful, analytic, and creative process that engages experimentation, creation, and prototyping models, gathering feedback, and more along the way. And it goes beyond disciplinary boundaries. You see that highlighted there. So you can see elements of different disciplines from the arts or the sciences embedded in this idea of being both an analytic and a creative process. So design by its very nature sits at the crossroads of many disciplines, and designers have to draw on ideas from STEM disciplines like natural sciences and math, as well as artistic or aesthetic creations. So that's why we say that design is actually a process that can help us bring STEAM together and serve as a kind of framework for rethinking curricula towards a more STEAM-centered approach. In our keynote, we shared a few examples of students using design thinking in STEAM projects, but for our purposes today, it's something that we're going to think about as teachers, how we can use it for our curricular processes as well. Towards that end, just a really quick overview of the design thinking model that we shared Wednesday night from the Stanford Design School. Many of you may be familiar with that, but if not, no worries. I believe there are some links available on the conference website and a lot of freely available tools online from the D School. But this is a 5-stage or mode model, which features these 5 different aspects or phases of design thinking. The first one being empathize, where you try to understand your users and get your head around their needs and how they think. In a full design process, this might include interviewing or observing users or students, stakeholders, just trying to put yourself in their shoes, in their mental headspace. Defining is where we come up with a definition of the problem. So where you define the challenge, the problem, the goal with a clear and detailed understanding of those users' needs, their problem, and your own insights and expertise. Ideation is where we come up with a wide possible range of solutions or ideas to bring to the task, the problem, the issue that you're working on, and really trying to challenge our assumptions and come up with creative ideas for innovative possibilities. So it's a lot of brainstorming and creative thinking here. Prototyping, that's where we come up with some sort of a model or some kind of concrete solutions, not a final solution or product, but a first draft solution. And testing, that is where this draft idea solution can be tried out so that we can learn what works and what doesn't. So from there, I just want to emphasize before we get started that this process can look linear, and we're going to go through it in a slightly linear way for our purposes today, but it doesn't have to be linear. It's meant to be iterative, and you and your students might use it in different ways or do the cycle differently as needed and as fits your classroom. So we're going to use this as a way for you to think about your students and your curricular needs towards a more STEAM paradigm today. We have about less than 40 minutes left to do this, so Punya is going to take it away.
All right, so we have less than 40 minutes, as Danah emphasized. And I think this is time to sort of warm up your muscles, your mental muscles, physical muscles, whatever that may be. And we have a request for you to make. This is going to go fast. We're going to move through this in a sprint where we will work together, tapping into both our collective wisdom and build our own personalized workbook. If you see the link that's on the chat, if you click on that link, it will give you an opportunity to make a copy of the slide set, and there are spaces there where you can take notes. I think an important thing here is to let go of inhibitions to when we have a prompt, to just go ahead and type in the chat ideas that come to you. This is how collectively we build this, right? Just to give you a sense of how this will go, we will go through this 3-cycle multiple times through this session today. So first, Danah and I will set the context, in 2 minutes, 2-3 minutes, and we will provide a prompt. Once the prompt is provided, what we would like you to do, go on the chat and share whatever thoughts, ideas that emerge. They may be words, they may be phrases, or maybe complete sentences, right into that chat, whatever comes to mind. And that will be sort of like a Twitter feed that you can monitor as the session goes on, right? And finally, we will give some time for you to then look at what ideas that have flowed by and see what makes sense for your context, for your classroom. Design is always about the particular, but we get the wisdom of the crowd and then we make it our own. So without further ado, and so at the end of that, we will have experienced one sprint through the design thinking process, and you will have this set of slides as well as any annotations that you make to keep with you as an artifact, as a resource for the future. So with that, let's go. Here's our first prompt, which is, what is your vision for a powerful STEAM learning experience? Right now, what we'd like you to do is just start typing into the chat your ideas for like a minute or two, as Cassandra just said in the chat. And I think it's important to monitor what other people are saying and see what ideas you can borrow, so that they make sense to you. So with that, let's go.
Borrow, adapt, work with. The chat is going to be a useful feature just for seeing what everybody's thinking. And we actually do have almost—
in charge of their own learning. I think that is such an important part of the design thing.
We actually do have almost 40 minutes because of the technical snafus. We have till 11:55. So
yeah,
maybe I'll oh, students need to create something from household objects. I love that. I've done that before. Hands-on, that's coming up a lot too. And you can see, like, what I love about the ideas coming out in the chat here is you can see in that people are sharing ideas of a powerful STEAM learning experience, and they are completely design thinking related as well. The hands-on, the creating, the collaboration, real world situations and possibilities. That is exactly right in the space of both design.
I think Brandolyn Tran has one which I really like, which is fun and loud. I think you can tell student engagement by the level of the sort of habber jabber that goes on in the classroom. Something interesting is happening when they are all talking or working together around a project and their problem. And I love this thing of sharing their thinking. One of my favorite quotes from Lee Schulman is that learning is valuable only when it is public and shared. Because otherwise learning just stays in my head. I have no idea of what meaning it has. When I put my ideas out there in the world and others engage with it, that's a true test of my learning. All right, so we're going to now go on to the next step. If you are on these slides, you'll see there is a box there where you can now look at all these different things that have gone by, maybe copy from them, maybe something struck a chord that you can type and keep notes for yourself. We're going to give you a minute or so to do that, so that you can have your own personal take from all these, the shared wisdom that has floated by. I love what Heather says. I cover novel instruments with my string students to say how creativity and physics combine to form music. That's wonderful. And that goes right back to the roots of mathematics with Pythagoras and all of that, with the music and mathematics.
And connecting students' hobbies and passions. I think that's so critical in creativity, that these are interdisciplinary, and who we are as people flows into what we're thinking and learning about. Such a part, that interdisciplinary, obviously it's central to STEAM, but such a part of design and design thinking too. And the real world nature of thinking keeps coming up too.
I love something that Brooke wrote there, which is more time to debrief at the end. And this act of reflection on what we have done and learned is so important for developing that meta knowledge. One of the things that is very interesting is that students often don't realize how much they have learned. And it is that moment of reflection or thinking back, like, what were the crucial points? What did I struggle with? When did I have that aha moment? What led to that? I think those are very critical. So again, give yourself a minute to type out your thoughts, and we will keep going. Moving on, Danah?
Yep, go ahead.
All right, so hold on to that vision that you sort of started articulating, those ideas that have floated by, because that's what we will build on in subsequent cycles. And I think it's important to see the sequence that we followed, which is we gave a little bit of an intro, we gave you a prompt, gave a chance for you to type whatever came to mind in that chat box, while reflecting on what is meaningful to your context, give you a chance to write it down and take notes for yourself, is a process that we will repeat, I think, 5 or 6 more times. So which is why this is a sprint. And I love the fact that you guys are jumping in. Some of these prompts are going to be a little more difficult, but that's where we have to let go of that voice of judgment and just whatever comes to mind, put it out there, because collectively we will be wiser than we are ever individually, right? So with that, we move on to the first stage. Danah, on to you.
I think you're doing empathize.
I'm doing empathize. That's right. I am doing empathize. All right. So that's okay. That's good. So empathy is really empathize, putting ourselves in other people's shoes and connecting how they might be feeling about their problem or circumstance. And this is something that as educators, we do all the time. And usually the way we would do it, we would go and talk to stakeholders. We would have maybe a session with the students to try to understand. If we are working in a problem with the community, we would go talk to community members, that process. However, in this session, we don't have the time to do that. What we will do is think of it slightly differently. This is a peeler. This is the standard peeler that you see very often, even available in stores now. And somebody looked at the peeler and their wife had a really hard time holding it because it's sharp. And they came to this design firm and they said, can we make kitchen utensils which are usable both by a grandmother with arthritic fingers as well as a football player? So the goal they set themselves was not to design for the chunk in the middle, the average person, so to speak, but to design for the extremes. And this is really important. This is the design that they came up with, which you all know now, the OXO peeler with its little ribbed rubber handle and the ribbed place where automatically you know where your thumb and finger are supposed to go. But the fundamental idea here is that when we look at the average, when we think about the average person, that really is no average person. Because you could be average on height, but you won't be average on weight. That all of us, each one of us individually, all of the learners in our classroom have what we call jagged profiles. And what it means is that you might be high on creativity, you might be average on time management, you may be low on listening. And that profile will vary for another person. And so when we design for the average, we are actually designing for a mythical person. The real people are, if we choose a continuum, if we say, here is one individual here, those are the real people. Okay, and so let's get out of this. All standardized testing, all of the things that we are imposed on us as educators really are about that mythical average. And so one way of sort of empathizing is to break out of that mold. And this takes us to the question that we have, that how might we design not for the average, but for individuals at the end of some continuum. So in the case of the peeler, it was the hand grip or the size of the hand. So this is our prompt. Think of your classroom and choose one continuum along which they fall. Envision a student at each end of this continuum and write a brief profile of the student. But before we go there, let's get on the chat examples of different continuum that you can think of. It could be social emotional, it could be along background knowledge, it could be cultural background, it could be family, it could be a whole range of things. What are some continua that you have to think about when you think about your classroom? Let's just put the continua, and then we will have you in the next part think about the profile of a student at each end. So let's just first have the continua typed in the chat.
Reading ability. Yes, you might have some students who are naturally already reading strong as readers, and some students who are struggling a little bit more. Low skill level, shallow thinking, high motivation. A child in poverty versus a child with
English language proficiency.
An introvert, extrovert, that's a classic one that affects us, or some students need that more quiet.
Parent support.
Yeah. Willingness to share ideas, that one's huge, where some students hold back and others want to share everything. At home support, capacity to pay attention. These are all great continua that our students fall on.
Exposure to the world. Such a powerful one.
Mm-hmm. Yep, self-regulation, perseverance. Kids come in with very different places, and we're trying to design for kids on different ends of the spectrum.
Focus, ability to focus, pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, I think, something that's of critical importance today, because at some level what we live in is an attention economy, mm-hmm. where these devices or these tools have been designed to sort of drag us into them. And the question then, how do we pay attention to that which is really important versus those things that are not? All right, so just in terms of time, this is where you can look through what people have written and then go to the workbook and take a moment to now think about one continuum that is truly important for your context. It may be one of those many that are floated by. Pick one and imagine a student at one end, a student at the other end of that continuum. If it's like ability to pay attention, okay, what is the most attentive student? What is the profile? And of the profile of the one who has really a hard time to focus. Or it might be background experience or background knowledge of scientific concepts that you want them to understand, or mathematical concept that you want to understand. Think of that continuum, write down a sentence, words, phrases that describe these individuals at these two ends. And that's you putting yourself in their shoes, sort of seeing, this is what I'm working with, right? Instead of working with a chunk in the middle, let me work with these two. How can I come up with solutions for these two extremes?
And that profile looks like a lot. It might just be like you said, might just be a sentence, a few words describing students at either end. It's just to get some ideas out there about who are the various, wide differences that students might have in my classroom, that I will be trying to design something STEAM related that works for both of them.
Again, and as educators, I know we all do that, and all of you do that, which is think in your particular context, but lots of words and ideas are floated by. Look through them, what really connects, and how can you think of this continuum?
And again, if you have the Google slide workbook, great, but if you don't, no problem. You just kind of keep these notes wherever it's.
And we'll share, the conference will share the slides with you. So moving on, Danah.
Yep.
This one is yours.
Yeah. So moving on to the second mode of defining the problem. This one is really maybe one of the most critical phases because it'll determine how well that we've understood the situation, the challenge, the problem, the goal, the task at hand, in order to be able to address it through solutions that will actually fit for and match the problem. I love these quotes because they point to the fact that as humans, we naturally want to, I know I have the instinct to naturally jump in and start working on trying to solve the problem before prepping our background knowledge on it or understanding it fully. We want to skip right to the solutions because we feel like we know our context so well that I think I know it'll work. But how you define the problem and putting the time in on that will determine the possible solution path. So if you define a problem as one thing versus another, that will drive the types of possible solutions that you might be able to come up with and will radically define what you do. So I'm going to give just a quick example of this before we try to do this with your own vision that you already articulated and goals. So years ago, there's this example of a Midtown Manhattan office building. And this design story is before cell phones came along to offer us some useful distractions. But there's this office building that had frustrated employees around the elevators around 8 a.m. and 5 p.m., which are peak rush hour times for office elevators. So the problem was initially framed as a need for more elevators to handle those peak crowds and avoid the annoyance from waiting employees. On a surface examination, you might think that, but that idea of more elevators is an engineering problem that could cost millions in a major building re-engineering in Manhattan. So they brought in a design team to observe and to talk with the users, the stakeholders, and realize that the real problem wasn't actually the delay. Most people were only waiting a few minutes, which doesn't drastically affect productivity, but those few minutes can feel like an hour when you're in kind of a tight space and you're just waiting, trying to get to work. So the problem was actually more how people experience the wait. So that's taking it from an engineering problem definition to a psychological problem definition as people's perceptions and experience. And the solution dramatically changed based on reframing it that way. They installed floor-to-ceiling mirrors near the elevator so people could have a minute to check themselves, fix their hair, put several television sets around the lobby to feature news or TV clips. Again, this is before cell phones, so today this might not be a problem, but this situation, the problem definition affected the solution, stopped the wait time complaints, and affected the expense and in terms of helping those elevator backlogs pass more smoothly. So with that in mind, defining the problem, we want to have you revisit your vision, that initial vision for a powerful STEAM learning experience. Go back and think about what that was, what you wrote down, and do that while considering the student profiles that you created or wrote up. And then think about what opportunities or challenges now emerge as you consider these profiles. We're going to try to write out a how might we question that addresses the challenge or opportunity. So for example, if your goal is to create a more interdisciplinary and active vocal experience where students are sharing and talking about their ideas, how do you do that while designing for the more introverted, quiet, hesitant to share students, as well as the more active, excited, want to get in there students? It could be a matter of needs and equity. You have students with very different resources in hand, and you want to have this powerful technology-centered experience. How are you going to design for the students at either end of the profile? So we're going to be just typing the ideas into the chat. And as you type in, kind of watch and see what other people are sharing. Think about what makes sense for your own classroom. Keep an eye out for things you might want to borrow or adapt. There's one from Brandolin. How might we open up presentation styles instead of assigning a presentation style? That's a great one, giving students more choice.
And that would be examples like using music or poetry to express a scientific idea. There's a whole genre of math poetry and science poetry that people do.
There's one from Rebecca, which is great. How might we provide language acquisition skills specific to the activity if they struggle with basic vocabulary? So you're going to have students on very different ends of just that one single continuum, but you want to do this STEAM activity with some specific language skills involved. How might we find time and space for materials? All of these constraints always happen in design activities. We're always designing with constraints in mind. Define purposeful practice. Students provide their role models of success and brainstorm how they use purposeful practice. Encourage
Safe
parents.
space to fail and try again.
Yep.
I mean, school at some level, I mean, most learning happens through failure. If I think of my life, I've learned the most were things that did not work out, and then you figure out how to work your way through them. But schools, we have stigmatized failure to a very, very great degree.
How might we provide equal access to materials for all students, possibly provide all supplies at the schools? Yes, and students have, if they're learning from home in the pandemic, they may have unequal access to materials. So maybe you're designing with that in mind and thinking about how can I do something that involves something really basic that all kids would have access to, or something that maybe can work with the activity without the need for some of these specific materials or everyday home materials. How might we help administrators get the messiness of STEAM in a classroom? That's a classic one.
That's a great one.
Yeah. How might we make them feel smart, empowered, and confident? That's great for the students who maybe struggle in that area. Hybrid environments, virtual environments, these are all really key constraints where we have people in different ends of the spectrum.
So Robert asked this question about in a virtual environment where we need to deliver supplies.
Yep.
Who don't have the ability to come to school, and how can we think of the home as a resource, as a possible resource?
Yep.
And this goes back to a comment during our keynote about how can we make curriculum more culturally responsive, and part of it is thinking of the home or the community as a resource. Is there a possibility there? How might we encourage free communication without judgment?
Absolutely. Critical for creative STEAM or design thinking projects.
Okay, I'm just looking at the time. We are at 35, so we have 20 more minutes, right?
Yep.
Okay, so we will keep moving on. Hopefully these ideas are coming, you're copying and pasting things that make sense, or synthesizing them and writing them in your own notebook. That becomes a resource for you. With that, moving on to the next stage, which is that of ideate. And this is at some level, maybe the most difficult one, because we are all constrained by the assumptions that we make. We make assumptions about this is X, or this is how things are, this is how things should be. And this was one of the things that is really important when you think of that all of education, all of this stuff is made up, but we are used to a certain way of doing things. So how do you break out of that? And if you think about, if you go online, if you look up books, there are lots and lots of books which will give you different ways of creative thinking, of idea generation. So we could have picked from a range of different things. We picked one, which is called forced association. And forced association is where you take something that you know, and you take something completely out there, which makes no sense. And you say, what if I put these two things together? So for instance, if I have to make a lamp, like what if I combine a lamp with a banana? What would that mean? Could it mean that the packaging is biodegradable, or it lights up when I peel it? Like, what does that mean? What ideas that it generate? Now, many of those ideas will be nonsensical, but what it does is it shakes things up. It makes us question the idea of what a lamp can or should be. So this one is always a little tricky. So this is where we really want you to drop that little guy sitting on your shoulder saying that's a bad idea and somebody's going to comment on it. No, this is where we are open. This is a safe space for us to share maybe the wildest ideas that we can have, because through that we can come up with something new and different. So with that, the prompt is consider one of the following movie genres or any other movie genre that you might choose. And how could that movie genre be a solution to this challenge? You initially had this STEAM vision, then we talked about this continua, we talked about these individuals in this continua, we talked about how you define something so that it can meet the needs of these extremes. And what is a movie genre a possible solution? So let's see what you guys type up in, whether it's a mystery or whether it's a family drama or a rom-com or a musical. What could it be? Let the ideas flow and let's see what comes up. A family drama. So what aspects, I mean, the question is really about what aspects of a family drama can make its way into a learning context? What are the elements that are common to all family dramas?
Great one, because maybe it's a sense of belonging that all students have in the activity. Maybe it's a sense of feeling comfortable or safe in a sort of familial kind of way. Mystery, that's a great one for a lot of these investigative types of activities, figuring out how to solve a problem.
Comedy, laughing while learning, having fun.
Being a detective, absolutely. There's a lot you can, keeping kids on the edge of their seat. Thriller, learning something new. How do I get kids to constantly be wondering what's going to happen next? What are they going to learn? What's going to get solved? Yeah, a rush.
And one of the things that good literature, good cinema does, it's propulsive. You can't wait to find out what happens next. A lot of our education is not propulsive. It doesn't have that sense of mystery, of opening up twists and turns. And how can we bring that element into a classroom context?
I love seeing the chat because people are thinking of things I never would have thought of, like rom-com, remaining optimistic and embracing things that are a bit goofy. How can that be part of a lesson that would draw? That's what people often love about rom-coms, suspense. It doesn't work, but we created something we didn't expect. We're wondering what's going to happen. Creating a musical that presents a science topic with pizzazz, rhythm, rhyme. That's awesome.
Yeah, and I think, Dana, you actually worked or interviewed a math educator, the rapping mathematician, who was creating raps about algebra. And he was surprised to go into the lunchroom and find kids were rapping math songs, which I thought was like, and I think he has a couple of CDs out or something too.
Yeah, teacher Alex Kajitani, who known as the rapping mathematician, but he just enjoyed rap music. He said he didn't really have any skill with it, but he just enjoyed it. So he took a wild stab at doing that for his classroom and felt a little embarrassed and awkward because the kids were laughing. But then later he said, I walked into the lunchroom and they were creating their own raps and they wanted to do it again. So this idea of sort of trying something new with different interdisciplinary things or mixing things that you don't know how they might fit, that forced association, you can come up with something.
Donovan had a comment here, which I thought was amazing, really great, which is the science fiction, particularly embracing what could be. We are currently in a project where we have award-winning science fiction authors imagining what the future of learning could be. And I just had a conversation just the other day with the author and one of our faculty members around what would interspecies communication look like? What does that mean about human exceptionability? I mean, the range of topics that emerge because we bring what can be, what could be, when we bring imagination into it, becomes amazingly powerful. Hero movies.
Comedy bringing joy during COVID. Yes, is there a chance to just do the learning and just get silly and lighten the mood?
Well, we hope that as these ideas are coming along, you are also incorporating them, thinking about them, taking some notes in the workbook as well, because then those are things that stay with you beyond these 45, 50 minutes that we have together. So we'll give you a minute or two to just scroll through, see what ideas emerge, and if things resonate, to make notes of them.
Period pieces, very cool. The evolution technology. See, people think of genres I wouldn't have even considered. I love it.
Yeah, that's cool. All right, we are at 12:42, and we still have a few more to go. Okay. So with that, on to you, Dana, with prototyping and testing.
All right, and if you're seeing ideas fly by that we've already passed, you can just drop them in your notes and come back to them later. We've put prototyping and testing together here for the sake of time and space, but these are each crucial stages in making ideas concrete and then testing them out. So a prototype will be the first actual thing that you create or that you make as you go through the design or problem solving process. It's a first draft of your vision, of your idea, your solution. It's not meant to be a final solution, just a way of making ideas real, making them concrete so that you can actually think about how you might try them out and see how they would work. Same thing if your students are doing a design thinking activity. When they prototype, it's not about them getting the final perfect end solution, but just it's a way to take ideas and make them real and then learn from them. So for example, if we were to go back to the OXO peeler story that Punya mentioned earlier, you can see in this photograph just how many prototypes they ran through and tested over time to learn about how their ideas worked and what worked or didn't work from different solutions. Prototyping and then testing them out, again, it's a way of learning and also learning how to make ideas real and then put it to the test. So again, this can be done in really small and manageable ways. So for example, if a restaurant were to decide to totally revamp their menu, they don't do a complete overhaul and final draft in just one go. They test out recipes, they prototype them, they see how they taste, how manageable they are to prep and to make, how they fit on the menu and customers respond. So if you're wanting to rethink a piece of a lesson or curriculum or some aspect of teaching practice towards a more STEAM-centered approach, you don't have to upend everything in one go. You can start small, and that makes it more manageable with little prototypes that you test. And critically, I think that you identify some small measures of success along the way. And by measures, it doesn't have to be numerical measures. You as a teacher are the designer in that classroom, and what you observe, what you have evidence of qualitatively or in any other way matters as a measure. So with that in mind, for the next prompt, we would like you to briefly describe how you could start small with some kind of a little prototype to test out your idea. What would be some of your measures of success? What are some things that would let you know in your classroom, in your practice, what is working? Or, you know, what are some things that you could manageably do in small chunks, bite-sized manageable pieces, and then try them out? And how would you try them out? So we're gonna get back.
Donald Shawn, who's one of the foremost Dewey scholar, educator, and thinkers about design, says that design is really a dialogue with your materials. So if you often interview novelists, they will talk about that I didn't write the novel took over and wrote itself. The characters wanted to go a certain way. So this is this dialogue with the materials, and you can never do that if you're just sitting and thinking about what am I going to do in my classroom. It is that act of trying something, and that will speak back to you so that you can go through those iterations of getting it right.
Yep.
And the question that is like, what in small, it might be just a small unit that you do. It might be just Fridays an hour where you students have a genius hour where they can pick their challenges and work on them. See how that works. What were the things that worked? What instructions worked and what didn't? And then maybe you can expand it out.
So we have Caitlin, jot down observations, reflect, adjust accordingly. That's exactly right. Sketching and discussion time for STEAM. I love that. We mentioned in the keynote that sketching and planning are activities that are crucial to design work of any type, and that they don't always get the amount of time and space, especially in some of the younger grades in K-12. So having that time to help them visualize their thinking and discuss jam boards, discuss purpose, guide the intent, breakout rooms, do a small activity and build on it weekly. I love that. How can you think of something that, you know, can just be a small start, a manageable start, and then build on it?
I don't know, now this is getting blurred in my head. I don't know, did I mention World of Wonder in the previous one, or have I mentioned this here, the Wall of Wonder thing?
You mentioned it here.
Okay. So this is one of the things that we used to do when we used to work with teachers in the Chicago public schools, is to have this sort of world of wonder. It's like, what questions are you wondering about? And one of the teachers took this and created what she called a wall of wonder, where students would go in and put their questions up on there, and then the class would vote, and they would say, okay, we are going to pick these three, and we're going to form 3 teams, and we are just going to try to figure this out. Like, why does ice float? You know, usually things when they get cold, they compress, but ice floats. Well, that was somebody's question. Somebody might have a question about how do we listen to music? The questions will come from the learners, and how do you create a small context where that can happen and test it? And you test it, and then you say, okay, what worked, what didn't? How would you? And I would love to see some examples of what measures of success would you think are valuable. Of course, there are the tests about student learning and understanding. We've already heard a couple of other examples people said about fun and noise. Testing student theories.
Heather gave a great example of a music lesson that offers reinforcement of a common lesson in academic classes, provide the lesson material to teachers to get their feedback, encourage teachers to share their plans, survey students, and it doesn't have to be a formal where they write out survey responses. You can do a quick informal survey to see how they liked and engaged. Kids will tell you. Test student theories.
I mean, one of the sad facts, and there is research on this, is how little students talk about what they learned in school outside of school. And to me, that's a significant sign of engagement. So just a question like, did you talk about what we did today or last week with anybody? And if they did, it means it is connecting with them in some way. We had that example of the aesthetic learning that Mark Gerard did, where he had so much data that kids were going home and seeing examples of what they were learning in school about erosion and weather and climate, and connecting them with their daily life, bringing it back to the classroom. That's what learning is about. That's a surefire sign that you're doing something right.
Mm-hmm. And I love this from Jennifer, ask kids what they're curious about. I think if you can draw it back, to what they are interested in, what's relevant to them, they're going to get excited and be on board. Notice or take notes about how you see kids using the practices. Focus on the practices, not just the content. That's great.
All right, I'm going to keep us moving along just from the point of view of time, because we're at 5 minutes and we have one more prompt that we have to go through. So there is more. Design is much more than that. It is much more than a series of steps to follow. So as educators, we can use it to develop innovative, creative experiences for our students. And as importantly, or maybe more importantly, it can be used by students to tackle authentic, and this thing about curiosity that somebody just mentioned, like what questions they are interested in, or what problems are they interested in solving in the classroom, in the local community, whatever it may be, create these design projects. And most importantly, it is about developing skills, mindsets, and habits that go beyond this immediate activity. So what the last prompt that we have for you is, what value, skills, mindset, habits could be gained by using design thinking to develop and refine STEAM instruction and curricula? What could be gained by students approaching their learning this way? Please drop your ideas in the chat and also use that as a way of adding to your own notes. Perseverance, logic,
Grit,
joy.
joy.
How rarely do we have joy in our educational settings? And how beautiful would it be to have that?
Open-mindedness, and that goes hand in hand with creativity. I study creativity as my primary topic of research interest, and the personality trait or the personal trait, habit of mind, that most correlates with creativity through life is an open mindset. And so many of these things coming through connect with that.
And this is Cecilia said that failure is expected and part of the process. This is incredibly important. And this is why we prototype. Because if we put all our eggs in one basket, that's a problem. But prototype means we can fail small and we can learn through that process, because the end result is not failure. The end result is to succeed, but that not all success can happen without these small bits of failure and learning along the way. That's where the process of, I mean, if you just, the image that Danah showed about all the different handles that they tried out. I mean, that's crazy, right? But that's what it takes to come up with a great solution.
And fail safely. I think that safety net for risk and failure is critical to creativity and STEAM. And that, like, if you think about it, we're so used to, even in higher education, giving people a grade and then it's one and done, on to the next thing. But in real life, that never happens. You have to work on a project. If you have an important thing, you workshop it, you keep iterating. Like an author will never just write a first draft of an article and then submit the first draft and then it's done. It's a working process with editors and revision and feedback, and that goes, I think, for almost any career. There's a lot of learning through safe, manageable, mini, and expected failure along the way.
I think Heather makes a comment which is actually very dear to my heart, which is this developing a desire for the knowledge. And very often learning has become this thing, trust us, it will be useful later. And that does not foster a desire for learning. What fosters a desire for learning is that innate curiosity that all people have. You and I and every child has that. And we have just not found ways of tapping into those innate curiosities and passions. And it's through that, I think, that if we tap those, that desire for learning, then can never go away. Then it's really a matter of us getting out of the way and letting them do that, right? And so that's a really powerful thing. So thank you for sharing that. All right, we are at 53. 2 more minutes, so congratulations. You have worked your way through one design sprint. We told you it would be fast, but you guys were awesome jumping in and participating. And whew, give yourself a pat in the back for doing that. But think about what we just did. We went through one round very, very quickly. I'm really, doing disservice to the richness of this, but giving you a flavor of what this design thinking process can feel like and the energy that it can bring when we bring a lot of voices together. That was the energy. The energy was really not brought by Danah and me. It was really brought by you guys sharing your ideas there. But again, not to minimize what we did, that we could create an environment where you guys could bring that in and a structure that we could build on. So if you think we went through one round of the design thinking process, learning from each other, but still focused on our particular context, because design is always of the particular. And finally, you now have an artifact, if you had a chance to download the slides, which is now with you, both what Danah and I put together, as well as the comments and things that you wrote down. So that's great. The slides also have some additional resources along with links to Danah and my websites, where we have a lot of resources and available for you guys freely. Almost everything that we write is out there, plus presentations, talks, videos, all that kind of stuff. We were hoping that we might have time for Q&A, but we are at 55. So Danah, I'll let you say the last words.
Yeah, so we just want to first say thank you to the Nevada STEAM Conference, the Museum of Art, Claire Munoz, Craig Rosen, Nisha Haller, and the whole organizing team, all the sponsors of this event and the opportunity, and especially thank you to, and thank you to Cassandra Kalaris as well, who is behind the scenes doing some magic, helping us run the show.
And also did a lot of work on the slides and the
also
event.
did a lot of work. So this was exciting and fun to do. And I want to especially say thank you to all of you who participated. My favorite, we've done this workshop twice now today, and my favorite part is the chat. My favorite part is all of the ideas. That means my favorite part is you all of the exciting ideas. And to me, that that just shows the creative and collaborative power of design thinking. When you get the ideas of your audience engaged, there's so much creative power in that, more than either or any of us who are part of designing this experience could have brought. You brought it. So thank you for giving us your time today.
And just a little bit of housekeeping. This is Nisha Haller, Director of Facilities and Events for the Nevada Museum of Art. So what we're going to do next is we're going to end this lovely session, and everyone needs to log out and log into the synthesis. It is a separate Zoom link, and you can access that via nevadasteam.org. And all of these sessions will be uploaded and shared about 2 weeks later. So because it was a sprint, you will have time to process and review later. And this was a great example of some design thinking, because this is one of our largest sessions, and they had to recreate their normal presentation. And I think they did a fantastic job. So thank you so much. And we look forward to seeing you all and hearing you all in the synthesis in 2 minutes. Bye, guys.
Thank you. Thank you so much.